Liam Brooks walked confidently through the bright lobby of the exclusive medical center in Los Angeles, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor as the earthy hint of his cologne mixed with the sharp, clean scent of antiseptic lingering in the air. Beside him, Bella, her long chestnut hair falling in perfect waves, clutched her phone, snapping a selfie while whining dramatically about the persistent stomach pain she'd been complaining about for days. "Do you think it's something serious, Liam?" she asked, her eyes shimmering with a mix of concern and vanity. Liam barely heard her. His fingers flew over his phone screen, shooting off quick replies to investors about a new high-end property project. "It's just a standard checkup, babe. You'll be fine," he said, eyes still locked on the glowing screen. Liam's life was a rush of negotiations, smooth charm, and a hint of ego. He had built it meticulously, piece by piece, but fate, like a ruthless conductor, was about to change the rhythm. They settled into the waiting area, an elegant space with muted gray walls and sleek leather chairs that whispered wealth and comfort. Liam let the weight of his seemingly perfect life settle over him. Bella, at 24, was everything he told himself he deserved after his divorce. Young, lively, a spark that made him feel invincible again. His ex-wife, Hannah, had been the opposite. Or so he convinced himself. For 7 years, Hannah had been his steady anchor, hosting polished dinners for clients, laughing at his dry jokes, and standing by his side when deals fell apart. But over time, Liam started to see her as dead weight. Someone who, he'd tell his friends over overpriced scotch, had grown too content. She stopped being exciting. She just turned ordinary, he'd say dismissively, brushing the memory away like lint off his crisp suit. What Liam never knew, what never crossed his mind, was that Hannah had hidden a truth. 8 months ago, right before they finalized their divorce, she found out she was pregnant. The news hit her like a lightning strike on a clear day. But Hannah, with her quiet resilience, chose not to tell him. Liam had already checked out emotionally, his eyes locked on the fresh life ahead of him. Telling Hannah about the baby would have felt like begging for scraps of love. And Hannah was never the type to beg. She buried her hurt deep, signed the papers, and stepped into her future alone. One hand resting on her growing belly, her heart shattered, yet strong enough to cherish the life inside her. In the waiting room, the low hum of the air conditioning filled the silence, while Bella flipped through a glossy magazine, pausing to point at a celebrity's outfit. "Do you think this would look good on me, Liam?" she asked, her tone playful, but fishing for validation. He gave her a half-hearted smile, automatic, detached, until the sudden commotion in the hallway snapped his focus. Nurses rushed past, a gurney rolled by at alarming speed, urgent voices cutting through the air. "Labor room 5, stat!" Liam's eyes lifted, curious but not concerned, until he saw her. Hannah. Time slammed to a halt. His phone slipped from his hands, hitting his lap with a dull thud. There she was, on the gurney, pale, sweat clinging to her forehead, dark hair stuck to damp skin, one hand gripping the metal rail, the other cradling her clearly pregnant belly. Very pregnant. Liam's heartbeat thundered in his ears. 1,000 thoughts detonated at once. How could he have missed this? Where had he been while she fought alone? Regret punched through him, cold and merciless, gutting the certainty he'd built his shiny new life on. He blinked hard, as if the sight might vanish if he refused to see it. But she was there, real, raw, and being pushed toward a delivery room. For a split second, their eyes locked, a whole history crashing between them in that fragile instant. In Hannah's eyes, a storm brewed, pain, fury, maybe shame, and something he couldn't quite read. Then she looked away and the gurney disappeared behind automatic doors. "Liam, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Bella's voice yanked him back, but it sounded miles away. "Nothing. Thought I saw someone I knew," he mumbled, forcing the words out. Bella followed his dazed stare to the now empty hallway. "Who? You're acting weird." Liam shook his head, dragging the polished mask back over his features. "No one important. Let's focus on your checkup." But even he didn't believe it. The weight in his chest pressed harder, a hurricane tearing through his mind. Pregnant. How far along was she? Could it really be his? The thought slammed into him like a punch. He did the mental math, counting back to those final tense weeks of their marriage. They'd hardly touched each other, but it wasn't impossible, far from it. And if it was true, Why hadn't she told him? Why hide something this massive? A cold guilt slithered up his spine, sharp as a Los Angeles winter night. He'd convinced himself Hannah was the anchor pulling him under, yet watching her on that gurney, fragile and fierce, he wondered if maybe he'd been the one chaining himself down. Bella kept chattering, oblivious to the storm swirling inside him. I think I'll ask the doctor about my sleep too. I've been exhausted lately. I've been waking up so tired, but you're not even listening, Bella complained. But Liam didn't hear her. His mind stayed stuck in that hallway, on the sight of Hannah on the gurney, in her eyes. He needed answers, needed to understand. But how? How do you walk up to the ex-wife you walked out on without so much as a second thought? How do you face the possibility that you're a father and never knew it? The thought burrowed into him like splinters under skin. He pictured Hannah alone in cold waiting rooms, signing paperwork alone, breathing through pain without him even knowing she was fighting for 2 lives, not 1. The shame burned hotter than fear. The receptionist called Bella's name, snapping him back. She stood up, fixing the strap on her designer purse. Come with me, Liam? She asked, expectant. He hesitated, eyes still drifting back to where Hannah had disappeared. I'll wait here. Text me if you need me. Bella rolled her eyes, clearly annoyed, but went in alone. Liam stayed behind in the waiting area. The quiet clashed with the chaos roaring in his head. He pulled out his phone, not to check business messages, but to scroll through his old WhatsApp thread with Hannah. Their last conversation, months ago, was an icy back and forth about dividing property. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. What could he even type? Hey, saw you at the hospital. Is that baby mine? It sounded insane, cruel. He could almost hear her voice in his head. Too little, too late, Liam. He hated how true it would be if she said it out loud. He locked the phone and moved to the window overlooking the parking lot. The Los Angeles sky was heavy with gray clouds, promising rain any minute now. Liam felt that same weight pressing inside his chest. Hannah could be in there right now, giving birth, and he was here stuck in limbo between what he'd thrown away and what suddenly felt so breakable. Bella would come back soon, all bright smiles and shallow worries, but Liam knew he couldn't keep pretending. Something had cracked open, something he couldn't ignore anymore. He stared at his faint reflection in the glass, heart hammering as he made up his mind. He had to talk to Hannah. He needed the truth. But before he could take a step, a nurse appeared at the hallway's edge, her face serious, clipboard in hand. Mr. Brooks? Her voice sliced through the quiet. Liam turned, throat tight. How did she know his name? The patient, Hannah Brooks, asked to see you. It's about the baby. The floor seemed to drop under him. Hannah wanted to talk, but about what? That the baby was his? Or that he had no right to claim this child at all? Or, God, what if something was wrong? Fear, so unfamiliar for him, gripped his chest like a clamp. He followed the nurse, each step echoing like a drumbeat toward a future he hadn't planned for. The hallway stretched on forever, the beeps of monitors mixing with the pounding of his pulse. What would Hannah say? And more terrifying, what was Liam ready to hear? He trailed the nurse deeper into the sterile corridor, the click of his polished shoes blending with the quiet hum of machines and hushed voices. Each step pulled him deeper into a part of his past he'd locked up tight, convinced he'd never have to face it again. The blast of cold air from the vents brushed his neck, but sweat still dotted Liam's hairline, exposing the storm inside him. He tried to steady himself. Hannah wanted to talk about the baby. The nurse's words kept echoing in his skull, heavy as lead. He couldn't decide if the feeling in his chest was dread, guilt, or some desperate flicker of hope. He didn't dare name it. The nurse stopped in front of a door marked Maternity Wing South. She turned to him, eyes gentle but unyielding. She's inside. It was a difficult delivery, but she and the baby are stable. You can go in, but please be gentle. She's been through a lot. Liam swallowed hard, the lump in his throat nearly choking him. He nodded, too choked up to reply, and pushed the door open with a hand that trembled despite his best effort to steady it. The room was small, washed in soft daylight from a window that looked out over a neat little garden. The clean bite of antiseptic mixed with the faint scent of fresh flowers, an oddly soothing contrast. Hannah lay propped up on a stack of pillows, her face pale but eerily calm, like someone who had survived a hurricane and now floated in its quiet aftermath. In her arms, swaddled in a blue blanket, was a tiny baby, tufts of dark hair, eyes shut tight, each little breath a fragile miracle. Liam froze in the doorway, his feet planted as if moving might crack the floor beneath him. Hannah looked up, met his eyes. No warmth there, no hatred either, just a cold, terrifying indifference. "You came," she said, her voice quiet but solid. "Didn't think you would." Liam opened his mouth, desperate to pour out everything at once. "Is he mine? Why didn't you tell me? What happened to us?" But all that spilled out was a stammered, "Hannah, I saw you in the hallway. I didn't know." She gave him a brittle smile, so sharp it felt like a knife. "Didn't know a lot of things, did you, Liam?" Her tone was steady, but every word carried the weight of months she'd survived alone. She brushed her fingertips across the baby's tiny head, so gently it made Liam's chest ache. "He was born 2 hours ago. 6 hours of labor, alone." That single word slammed into the silence like a hammer. Liam stepped closer, his eyes locked on the baby, the reality of him too much and not enough all at once. Is he mine?" The question fell out, raw and clumsy. Hannah's eyebrow lifted, her disbelief plain. "You think I'd hide something like this for fun?" "Yes, Liam, he's yours, but don't think that changes anything." Her voice cut him sharper than any blade. Liam felt the room tilt, gripped the edge of the bed to steady himself. "Hannah, if I'd known, I swear I would have." She shut him down with a flick of her hand. "Would have what? Come crawling back, canceled your fancy dinners, dumped your little side project, Bella?" The acid in her sarcasm burned, but beneath it was pain, pain he knew he'd planted there himself. "I didn't know," he whispered, hoarse. "You should have told me." A laugh escaped her, short, dry, almost cruel. "Told you what, Liam? That while you were busy signing divorce papers without even looking at me, I was carrying your child?" "While you paraded her around like I was invisible," she said, shaking her head, eyes glistening with tears she refused to let fall. "I wasn't going to beg for your love. I wasn't going to beg you to stay." Liam felt something deep inside him crack. He'd thought he was too polished, too controlled to ever break. But hearing it from her lips, raw and unfiltered, splintered something hard and selfish inside him. He wanted to protest, to swear it hadn't been like that he would have done everything differently. But even in his own mind, the words sounded empty. He had made the choice to leave, to choose Bella, to choose a life that glittered on the outside but now felt hollow to the bone. His eyes dropped to the baby again, and something unfamiliar and overwhelming swelled in his chest, a mix of wonder and fear. "What's his name?" he asked, almost scared to hear it. "Ethan," Hannah said, her voice finally softening, just a fraction. "After my grandfather." She looked down at Ethan, a real gentle smile blooming across her exhausted face. "He's perfect, Liam. He's perfect." Liam took a step closer, cautious, seeking an unspoken permission. Can I hold him?" Hannah paused, eyes measuring him, weighing whether he deserved this tiny trust. Finally, she nodded once. "Be careful. He's delicate." She placed Ethan gently into Liam's arms. The baby's lightness startled him. The warmth of that tiny body pressed to his chest made everything else disappear. It was real. This was his son. His hands trembled as he held Ethan with a reverence he hadn't felt for anything in years. For once there were no deals, no clients, no headlines, just this moment. This little life he'd helped create. Guilt and awe collided in his ribs. How could he have walked away from this without knowing? How could he ever have thought any boardroom deal could feel bigger than this heartbeat pressed to his chest? "Hannah, I want to be part of this," he said, his voice raw. "I want to be a father to him." Hannah's eyes cooled again, steel creeping back into her voice. "Being a father doesn't mean showing up when it's convenient, Liam. It means being here. It means sacrifice. Do you even understand what that is?" The question cut him because he didn't have an honest answer. At least, not yet. But before he could speak, the door swung open and Bella stormed in mid-sentence. "Liam, the doctor said you were." She stopped cold, her gaze locking onto Liam cradling a baby, then flicking to Hannah in the bed. The air thickened, every second stretching tight like glass ready to crack. What is this?" Bella asked, her voice shaking, straining to balance confusion and rising rage. Liam's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Hannah didn't flinch. "Bella, she said calmly, each word a bullet. "This is Ethan, my son, and Liam's." The truth landed like a slap. Bella's eyes darted between Hannah and Liam, filling with stunned betrayal. "Your son? You have a child with her?" She laughed, a high, brittle sound. "And when exactly were you planning to tell me, Liam? Or was I just supposed to find out like this?" "Bella, I swear, I didn't know." "Not until today," Liam said, his voice low, handing Ethan back carefully to Hannah's waiting arms. "I saw her in the hall, and I swear this is all new to me." Bella folded her arms tight against her chest, her expression hardening like stone. "New to you? And what does that make me, Liam? Just a placeholder while you sort out your mess with your ex-wife?" She shot Hannah a venomous look. "And you? Why didn't you say something sooner? What is this, some plan to ruin his life?" Bella snapped, her voice sharp and brittle. Hannah lifted an eyebrow, unbothered. "I don't ruin lives, Bella. I protect mine, and now my son's." Her calm tone only poured fuel on Bella's rage. Bella spun toward Liam, jabbing a finger at him. "You pick, Liam. Right now, me or this." She waved a hand at Hannah and Ethan like they were just some mess he could sweep away. The ultimatum clamped around Liam's throat like a collar. He glanced at Hannah, gently rocking Ethan with a quiet strength he suddenly envied, then back at Bella, whose eyes screamed for an answer. Bella, I need time to process this," he said, the words stumbling out. "I just found out I'm a father." Bella barked out a harsh laugh, eyes shimmering with tears. "You think I'm going to wait around while you play daddy with her? No, Liam, I deserve better than this." She snatched up her purse and stormed out, slamming the door behind her so hard a picture on the wall rattled in its frame. The silence that settled afterward felt suffocating. Hannah said nothing, just kept swaying Ethan gently, her face unreadable as if Bella's meltdown hadn't touched her at all. But Liam knew she was watching him, measuring him. "You didn't have to be so brutal with her," he said at last, voice low. "And you didn't have to disappear when I needed you." Hannah shot back, still not looking at him. She adjusted Ethan's blanket with practiced care. "But here we are." She exhaled, her shoulders drooping a little. "Go after her, Liam, if that's what you really want." Her words struck him deeper than any insult. He wanted to stay, wanted to hold Ethan again, to fix this fracture he'd caused. But Bella's tears, her ultimatum, dragged at him, yanking him back toward the doorway. He searched Hannah's face one last time, desperate for a crack of forgiveness or a sign she still believed in him. But all he got was a look that said, "Prove it, or don't." He turned and left, the hallway somehow feeling twice as long now. His phone buzzed as he reached the end, Bella's name flashing on the screen. "I'm in the car. Last chance." Liam stopped, torn in half, between the broken past he'd created and the fragile truth waiting behind that hospital door. But something new pushed up through the guilt and confusion. Ethan, his son, and a chance to finally be the man he'd never been. In the days that followed, Liam barely slept. He came back to the hospital every day, but Hannah was gone, discharged. He tried calling, but Hannah never picked up. Mutual friends told him she was staying with her mother, Margaret, in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Pasadena. One evening, Liam drove there, heart pounding in his chest, but when he reached the corner, he froze, unable to force himself to walk up and knock. What could he possibly say? How do you undo years of failure in a single conversation? His hands clenched on the steering wheel, knuckles white, as he pictured Hannah's eyes, how they might look at him now, all forgiveness spent, replaced by that quiet, cutting strength that made him feel so small. The thought made his stomach turn. Meanwhile, Bella drifted further away. Her messages turned curt, icy, full of demands that he make a choice, her or this new life. But Liam couldn't choose. Every time he closed his eyes, all he saw was Ethan's tiny face, felt the warm weight of his son against his chest. He started reading books on fatherhood, late-night articles about newborn care, how to show up, how to be there. It felt like some part of him that had been asleep for years was slowly waking up. A week later, he found the nerve to try again. He parked outside Margaret's house, a modest place on a tree-lined street, kids' laughter echoing from somewhere down the block. The sun was dipping low, softening everything. On the porch, Hannah sat rocking Ethan gently in a baby swing. She looked exhausted, but beneath it, there was a quiet resilience he realized he'd never really seen before. Liam stepped out of his car, each footstep loud in his own ears. "Hannah," he called, voice catching. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face, but no smile. "What do you want, Liam?" Her tone was flat, but her eyes dared him to lie. He pushed open the little gate and walked closer, heart hammering so loud he could barely hear himself. "I want to know my son. I want to be here. The right way." The words felt too small for the size of the regret pounding in his chest, but they were all he had left to offer. Hannah studied him for a long, unblinking moment, like she was reading his bones. Then she gestured to the empty chair beside her. "Sit. Let's talk." He sank into the chair, every nerve on fire. But before he could find the right words, his phone buzzed. Bella's name lit up the screen, bright and insistent. Hannah noticed, one eyebrow lifting, her voice soft but pointed. "Are you going to answer that?" Liam stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Answering meant clinging to what was familiar. Letting it ring meant letting go of that safety net, choosing Ethan, choosing Hannah, choosing a road with no guarantees. The ringtone stabbed the silence, each beep like a test. A bead of sweat rolled down his neck, but for once he didn't flinch. In one breath he couldn't explain. Liam silenced the call and shoved the phone deep in his pocket. Hannah didn't speak, but something in her eyes softened, just enough. She lifted Ethan from the swing and placed him carefully into Liam's arms. He felt the baby's weight again, but this time it wasn't crushing. It was exactly the burden he wanted to carry. That night, driving home, Liam felt lighter than he had in years, but his mind buzzed with questions he couldn't answer yet. He knew trust wouldn't come easy, that Hannah still doubted him, that Bella would never forgive him. But for once, he felt like he was choosing more than himself. Days later, while juggling client calls and quick visits to see Ethan, Liam's phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He picked up, and Margaret's warm, slightly shaky voice filled his ear. "Liam, sweetheart, we need to talk. It's about Hannah, and something she hasn't told you." Her voice trembled like she was about to share a secret so big it might break all of them open. Liam felt the breath drain from his lungs. What hadn't Hannah told him? Was there something beyond Ethan? Something that could flip his whole world upside down again? Liam clutched the phone tighter, heart pounding, as Margaret's voice came steady but tense. "Come over now, and come prepared." The fading sunset had already stained the sky a deep violet when Liam pulled up in front of Margaret's Pasadena house. The soft tick-tick of the engine cooling matched the restless churn in his chest. The quiet street, the gentle sway of tree branches, the far-off giggle of kids playing. Everything felt too calm for what Margaret's urgent words hinted at. Come prepared. What did that even mean? Was there more than Ethan, something that could rewrite everything again? He turned off the ignition, the sudden hush wrapping around him like a suffocating blanket. He forced himself to breathe deep, fighting the anxiety crawling up the back of his neck. Liam pushed open the gate, its faint squeal like a whispered warning in the still air. Margaret's house was humble, faded white siding, potted flowers spilling jasmine perfume that clashed with the knot in his stomach. Hannah sat exactly where he'd seen her last, rocking Ethan gently in her arms. She looked up at him, no smile, just an uneasy worry clouding her tired face, something different than before. Margaret stood beside her, silver hair pulled into a tight bun, arms folded, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "You got here fast," Margaret said, her tone calm but trembling at the edges. "Come inside, we need to talk." Liam obeyed, stepping into the small house. The old wooden floor groaned under his weight. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with the warm, comforting smell of homemade bread. The living room, cluttered with framed snapshots and mismatched cushions, felt like a museum of memories that suddenly weren't his to touch. He sank onto the couch, the scratchy upholstery rough beneath his fingertips. Hannah quietly laid Ethan down in a small crib tucked into the corner. The baby sighed, deep in sleep, blissfully untouched by the tension pressing in on the adults. Margaret sat down across from him, clasping her hands tight in her lap. Her gaze pinned him in place, kind but unflinching, demanding honesty he wasn't sure he could give. "Hannah didn't want me to tell you this," she began, her voice low but steady. "But you need to know. Not for you." Her eyes flicked toward Ethan, but for her. And for him. A chill crawled up Liam's spine, cold enough to make him shiver even in the warm little house. "Know what?" he asked, his voice scraping out too small. He glanced at Hannah, still standing, still staring at the carpet, her lips pressed into a thin, tight line. "Hannah, what's going on?" he asked, but Hannah didn't lift her head. Her shoulders tensed, bracing for a blow she knew was coming. Margaret inhaled slowly, steadying her voice like she was pulling courage from somewhere deep. When Hannah found out she was pregnant, it wasn't just the shock of doing it alone. She was sick, Liam. Really sick. The words struck him one by one, each landing heavier than the last. Liam blinked hard, trying to absorb it. Sick? His voice cracked as he leaned forward, elbows digging into his knees. "What do you mean, sick?" "She has a heart condition," Margaret said gently but firmly, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "A serious arrhythmia. The doctors warned her that carrying Ethan could kill her, or him, but she did it anyway." Liam felt the world tilt beneath him, the same icy fear he'd felt that night, seeing Hannah on that gurney, helpless and pale. Margaret pressed on, voice trembling. She spent months in and out of hospitals, tests, treatments. She risked everything to keep Ethan safe. Every single day could have been her last. And she did it alone, Liam, because you weren't there. The quiet in the room smothered him. He turned to Hannah, hoping, praying this was some awful mistake. But when she finally looked up, her eyes told him everything. The exhaustion, the quiet rage, but also an iron strength he'd never really seen in her before. "Why didn't you tell me?" he choked out, fighting the crack in his voice. "Hannah, I could have done something. Helped." Her laugh was too soft to be cruel, but it cut anyway. "Helped? How, Liam? You were so busy with Bella, your next deal, your next dinner reservation. I didn't want to be your pity project." She paused, taking a breath that seemed to steady the whole house. "I chose Ethan. I chose to fight for him. And thank God, we both survived." Liam felt tears sting his eyes, something so rare it startled him. He pictured her alone, fighting for a baby he didn't even know existed, while he was out playing the polished businessman with Bella on his arm. It hollowed him out from the inside. "Hannah, I didn't know, I swear." "Don't swear," Hannah cut in sharply, her eyes flaring. "Your promises don't mean anything until you back them up." She nodded toward Ethan, who squirmed gently in his crib as if he knew they were talking about him. "He's what matters now, not me, not you, not what could have been, him." Margaret leaned forward, her tone softer but heavy with truth. "Hannah's heart is stable for now, Liam, but she's not out of the woods. She'll need surgery soon, serious surgery, and Ethan needs a father, not someone who shows up when it's easy, someone who's really here. Because we don't know what tomorrow holds." She pinned him with a stare that stripped him bare. "So, tell me, are you strong enough for that? Or are you going to run away again?" Liam looked over at Ethan, small, perfect, utterly trusting. And deep down, beneath the shame and regret, something solid took root. A vow stronger than anything he'd ever made in a boardroom or over champagne. "I want to be here," he said, his voice steady for once. "I'm not running this time." He said it again, his voice steady in a way it hadn't been in years. "I want to do this right. For him, and for you, Hannah. I'll be here. Every step of the way." Hannah didn't answer out loud, but for just a heartbeat, her eyes softened enough to show she'd heard him. Margaret, though, wasn't impressed. She crossed her arms and said, "Words are cheap, Liam. Prove it. With actions." Then she stood up, ending the conversation. "Hannah needs rest. She has a doctor's appointment tomorrow to plan the surgery." Liam left Margaret's house with a heaviness he couldn't shake, but for the first time, the weight didn't make him want to bolt. He drove through Pasadena's quiet, dark streets, radio silent, the only sound the low hum of the tires and Margaret's voice looping in his mind. Hannah was sick. She nearly died to bring Ethan here, and he hadn't been there. The guilt sat on his shoulders like a bag of stones, but for once, he didn't want to shrug it off. He wanted to carry it. In the days that followed, Liam began to change. He canceled pointless meetings, let non-urgent calls go unanswered, and spent long nights researching arrhythmias, infant care, and what it meant to really show up as a father. He knocked on Margaret's door every day, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with diapers, sometimes with nothing but himself. Hannah received him warily at first, but didn't shut him out. He held Ethan, learned to change diapers with an awkwardness that made Hannah laugh despite herself. Every small laugh was a brick in a fragile bridge he hoped to rebuild. Bella, meanwhile, refused to fade quietly. Her messages turned sharp, then outright cruel, until one evening she showed up at his downtown Los Angeles apartment, eyes red and voice trembling with anger. "You're throwing everything away for her, Liam. For an ex-wife who doesn't even want you back," she yelled, her hands trembling. Liam tried to explain, but the words were too small for what he felt. "It's not about her, Bella. It's about Ethan. About being the man I should have been. I have to do this." Bella's laugh cracked into a sob. "When she breaks you again, don't crawl back to me, Liam. Don't you dare." She slammed the door on her way out, leaving behind the echo of a life he no longer craved. But Liam's real test was still waiting. One morning, as he helped Hannah fold Ethan's tiny clothes in the nursery, Margaret walked in, her face drawn tight, her voice careful. "Hannah, the doctor called." Hannah froze, a stack of baby onesies balanced in her arms. "What did they say?" she asked, her voice too calm. "They want you in tomorrow. They found something in the last tests. They didn't explain much, just that it's urgent. They want to run everything again and admit you." Hannah's fingers slipped, the soft pile of clothes dropping to the floor with a whisper that somehow sounded thunderous in the silence. She looked at Ethan, safe in his crib, oblivious, then at Liam, her eyes wide and shining with something he couldn't quite name but felt deep in his bones. Fear, maybe, or a silent plea. That night, Liam couldn't sleep. He sat on Margaret's porch long after everyone else had gone to bed, staring up at a sky freckled with stars, the weight of possibly losing Hannah pressing so hard against his chest it hurt to breathe. He'd spent so many months convincing himself he was better off without her, without the calm steadiness she brought, the quiet devotion. But now, watching her fight for Ethan, seeing her be the mother he could never replace, he realized how deeply he'd misjudged her, how much he'd lost, and how much he still wanted to love her. The next morning, he was right beside her at the hospital, gripping her hand as they stepped into the sterile exam room. The doctor, a middle-aged man with a tired voice and thin-rimmed glasses, scanned the latest charts with a grave look that made Liam's stomach twist. "Hannah, we need to repeat the tests today. We'll be admitting you for observation," the doctor said gently. Hannah nodded, her expression calm, but her hand tightening around Liam's until he could feel her pulse fluttering against his skin. She moved down the long hospital corridor slowly, each step echoing against the polished floor, as if her feet were syncing with her fragile heartbeat. Liam matched her pace, holding her hand with a grip so steady it disguised the tremor in his own bones. The crisp antiseptic smell mixed with the faint sweetness of flowers in a vase by the nurse's station. Hannah's small overnight bag swung lightly from Liam's shoulder. He'd refused to let her carry it. "I'm staying with you, Hannah. I'm not leaving," he said, his voice low but firm enough to silence the old version of him that always looked for the exit. Hannah didn't look at him, but she nodded, her eyes locked straight ahead like she was bracing herself against every frightening possibility. At the admissions desk, a nurse with kind eyes handed her a clipboard. "We'll get your room ready, Miss Brooks. Everything's under control." Under control. The words rang hollow in Liam's ears. What control was there when the doctor talked about discrepancies in her test results? A vague, heavy word that sat in his gut like a stone? He watched her sign the forms with hands that trembled just slightly, and his chest ached at the thought of losing her now, when he was finally seeing her clearly for the first time. When Hannah was led to her room, Liam lingered in the waiting area, the walls too white, the silence too loud. He pulled out his phone, staring at the old WhatsApp message from Margaret. "They need to repeat the tests. She's being admitted." He closed his eyes, forcing away the memory of Hannah on the gurney, Ethan alone in his crib, everything he'd ignored for so long. Then, as if something inside him flipped, he did what he'd never done before. He asked for help. Not from clients or board members, but from people who truly knew them both. He opened a group chat with the handful of friends who'd stood by them during better years, who'd laughed at their wedding, who knew Hannah's worth even when he hadn't. With fingers that shook harder than he'd admit, he typed, "Guys, I need a favor. Hannah's in the hospital. It's her heart. They're doing tests. Please, pray for her and Ethan. They're everything to me now." He hovered, pride warring with the rawness of it all. But for Hannah, for Ethan. He hit send. Within minutes, replies flooded his phone. Stay strong, Liam. We're praying. Hannah's a warrior. She'll get through this. We've got you, man. Each message felt like a stitch pulling together the raw tear in his chest, binding up wounds he'd ignored for too long. Margaret arrived at the hospital not long after, her quiet strength filling the waiting room. Liam watched her as she stood near the corner window, her voice steady but thick with emotion as she spoke into her phone. My daughter needs prayers. She's strong, but she needs all of us now. Please just pray for her. Her calm in the face of fear humbled him more than any lecture could. Liam approached her slowly, feeling oddly small. Margaret, I started a prayer chain too, with our old friends. I hope it helps. Margaret looked at him, surprise flickering before her eyes softened with quiet approval. You're starting to understand, Liam. Faith can move mountains, and my daughter needs every mountain moved tonight. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed again. He glanced down, Bella's name flashing on the screen. The new message was blunt and cold. So you chose. Good luck with your family. Don't call me. A flicker of guilt stung him for hurting her, but there was no space left for second guesses. Before he could pocket the phone, it vibrated in his hand again. An incoming call. Bella. He hesitated, then answered, knowing he had to shut this door for good. Bella, I'm at the hospital with Hannah. She's admitted. This isn't the time. Her voice cracked through the line, sharp and wounded. At the hospital? With her? You're throwing everything away, Liam. I gave you everything, and you run back to the woman you dumped. You'll regret this. Liam closed his eyes. Her anger stabbed at him, but it didn't break through this time. Bella, I'm not choosing against you. I'm choosing Ethan. I'm choosing to do this right. I'm sorry. Before she could answer, he ended the call. The silence left behind was raw but honest, like ripping off a bandage that had needed to go for years. That night, Liam stayed at the hospital, perched on the stiff chair beside Hannah's bed. She slept deeply, her face pale but peaceful under the steady beep of the heart monitor. Each blink of green light felt like a second borrowed, each breath a promise she was still fighting. He held her hand gently, his thumb brushing the back of her fingers. The warmth in her skin reminded him this was real. She's still here. He bent close, his voice a whisper that barely disturbed the hush of the room. You're stronger than I'll ever be, Hannah. I swear, I won't leave you alone again. Morning crept in, carrying a hush so tense it felt alive. Margaret arrived at dawn, clutching her worn Bible, her fingers tracing its pages as she whispered prayers into the sterile hospital air. Hannah, awake now, looked so much smaller in the harsh fluorescent light, frail but still carrying that quiet, unshakable strength that Liam was only just learning to respect. You didn't have to stay all night, Liam, she said, her voice a whisper roughened by fatigue but edged with her usual dry humor. I'm not made of glass. He smiled despite the knot in his chest. I know, but I needed to be here. The doctor came in soon after, same tired eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses, same thick file tucked under his arm. But today, there was something new in his expression, a flicker of disbelief wrapped in cautious hope. Hannah pushed herself upright, her heart racing under the monitor's steady beep. Margaret's knuckles whitened around her rosary. Liam stood next to Hannah, his whole body coiled like a spring bracing for bad news. Hannah, we have the results from your repeat tests, the doctor began, flipping pages like he still didn't quite trust what he'd seen. And it's something I can't fully explain. The quiet swallowed the room, broken only by the soft, steady blip of the monitor. Hannah's fingers dug into Liam's hand, her nails biting his skin, but he barely noticed. What is it? She asked, her voice cracking. The doctor drew a breath, like he needed to say it out loud to believe it himself. The issue with your artery? It's gone, completely. The scans show your heart is functioning normally. No sign of the arrhythmia at all. We ran the tests twice. It's like a miracle. The word floated there, heavy and weightless all at once. Hannah stared at him, eyes wide and wet. Margaret let out a ragged sob, burying her face in her hands. A miracle, Hannah whispered. The doctor managed a small, odd smile. There's no medical explanation. It may have shifted after Ethan's birth. Your body simply healed itself. We'd like you to come back in a month for follow-ups. But for now, Hannah, you're healed. Liam felt the room tilt around him. Only this time, it wasn't fear but a wild, dizzy relief. He looked at Hannah just as she covered her face with her hands, tears slipping through her fingers. Margaret leaned in, wrapping her daughter in an embrace so fierce it looked like it could keep the whole world standing. "I knew it, my brave girl. I knew God wouldn't leave you," she murmured, her voice breaking. Before he could stop himself, Liam stepped forward and pulled Hannah into his own arms, ignoring her startled flinch. "You're okay. You're okay," he whispered, as if saying it out loud would make it stick forever. She didn't pull away, but she didn't fully sink into him either. When she finally looked at him, her eyes shone with a softness he'd rarely seen, an unguarded fear she'd fought so long to hide. "I thought I might never watch Ethan grow up," she said, her voice splintering around the words. And just like that, Liam's heart broke clean in two. "You will, Hannah. You will. You'll be here for him. For us." The days that followed were a careful mix of celebration and caution. Margaret's little house, its weathered white walls soaking up every burst of laughter, pulsed with a warmth that seemed to push the fear far away. The comforting smell of fresh coffee drifted through the rooms, blending with the sweet aroma of pies neighbors had brought, and laughter rose from the living room, where friends gathered to celebrate Hannah's return home. At the center of it all, Hannah sat holding Ethan, his peaceful face unaware of how close he'd come to never knowing this life. Liam stayed close by, folding tiny blankets with an awkwardness that made some of the guests smile. He couldn't stop watching Hannah, half afraid that if he blinked, this fragile, miraculous moment would slip away again. Her impossible recovery lingered like sunlight in the corners of every room, a gift no one dared question, only cherish. Margaret, hair pulled into its usual tidy bun, moved among the guests, pouring tea with steady hands honed by decades of caring for others. "It's God, folks," she said, her voice bright with faith. He heard every single prayer. Heads nodded, a few eyes misty, stories of hope and answered prayers echoing through the chatter. Liam, never the church-going type, never the one to whisper prayers into the dark, felt something new stir inside him watching this. He thought of the prayer chain he'd started, the flood of support from people he hadn't spoken to in years. For once, it wasn't about him, not his ambitions, not his regrets. It was about Hannah. About Ethan, about building something real. Hannah, too, looked lighter, freer than he'd seen her in years, though a careful guard still lingered behind her eyes whenever she met his. Trust wasn't hers to hand back freely. He'd have to earn it, piece by piece. But sometimes, in the smallest ways, she let it slip. Like when Liam stumbled through an off-key lullaby that somehow hushed Ethan's wails, and Hannah's lips curved into an unguarded smile. Or when he wrestled with a pile of screws and vague instructions to build Ethan's new crib, muttering curses that made her laugh so hard she nearly dropped a bottle. "You're stubborn, aren't you?" she teased, wiping tears of laughter. And to Liam, that sound was music, hope, disguised as her laugh. But not everything was calm. Liam's phone buzzed now and then, vibrating on the counter or his nightstand late at night. He didn't need to check to know it was Bella. Her messages swung like a pendulum between anger and pleading. "You really think she loves you, Liam? She's using you for the baby." Or softer, "I miss you. Call me. Please, let's talk." He read them, every word biting at old guilt for how he'd let her believe in a future that never really existed. But he didn't reply. His choice was made, sealed each time he saw Hannah rocking Ethan, each time he held his son and felt a purpose bigger than himself. Bella belonged to a past he no longer wanted. One night, as Liam dried dishes beside Hannah at Margaret's kitchen sink, his phone buzzed on the counter. Bella again. Hannah paused, a clean plate in her hands, one eyebrow lifted but her mouth silent. Liam let out a breath and picked up the phone, his thumb hovering. "I need to end this, for good," he murmured, more to himself than to her. He stepped out onto the porch, the cool night breeze calming the heat rising up his neck. He answered on the second ring, his voice steady. "Bella, please, stop." Her voice cracked through the line, trembling with anger and something like grief. "You're blind, Liam. You think she loves you? She's just using you, keeping you around for the baby, for convenience." Liam shut his eyes, her words brushing old insecurities but never landing the way they once would have. "Bella, I don't know what the future looks like, but I do know I want to be a father to Ethan, and I want to be there for Hannah, if she'll have me." "I'm sorry," but you need to move on." Before she could fire back, he ended the call. The night exhaled around him, silent, clear, and almost forgiving. When he stepped back into Margaret's kitchen, Hannah was still drying the same plate, her eyes fixed on him with an unreadable calm. "Sorted?" she asked, her tone neutral but edged with curiosity. Liam nodded, his heart drumming. Sorted. Weeks bled into months, and Liam became a fixture in Hannah and Ethan's world. He learned the patterns of his son's tiny life, the songs that coaxed him to sleep, the way to cradle him to soothe his colic, the exact hour when his gummy smile broke through the tears. Piece by piece, Hannah's guard softened, tentative but real. They talked about everyday things, the fickle California weather, Ethan's funny habits, Margaret's cooking secrets. And sometimes, when the porch lights flickered and the baby monitor hummed, old truths surfaced like ghosts they could no longer ignore. "Ever wonder how things would have been?" Hannah asked one night, her voice carrying in the hush while Ethan dozed in his stroller beside them, "if we hadn't split?" Liam's throat tightened. He didn't pretend to brush it off. "Every day," he admitted quietly, "and every day I regret not fighting harder. For you. For us." She didn't answer. But under the porch light, her eyes shimmered with something gentle. A quiet maybe that tasted like hope. A month later, Hannah returned to the hospital for her final round of follow-up tests. As always, Liam refused to let her go alone. "You've got work, Liam. You don't have to put your life on hold for me," she protested, rolling her eyes. He only squeezed her hand. "This is my life, you and Ethan." Inside the exam room, the doctor, same thin-rimmed glasses, but now with a bright smile, flipped through her chart and glanced up. "Hannah, the tests confirm everything we saw last time. Your heart is perfect. No sign of the arrhythmia. You're officially healed." Hannah pressed her hands to her mouth, tears slipping out despite her quiet laugh. Liam didn't think, he just pulled her into his arms. "I knew it, Hannah. I knew you'd be okay," he whispered, his voice thick with relief. Margaret, standing near the door, raised her hands skyward. "Thank you, God. Thank you," she said, her voice breaking with gratitude. Even the doctor chuckled, blinking away the emotion in his own eyes. Hannah's recovery poured fresh hope into everyone. Margaret's home, its worn white walls, seemed to glow, absorbing the laughter and the clink of coffee mugs, the warmth of pie fresh from the oven. Friends dropped by to coo over Ethan and to toast Hannah's new lease on life. In the corner of it all, Liam caught Hannah watching him bounce Ethan on his knee, singing that same off-key lullaby that made her smile every time. And in that smile, fleeting but real, Liam saw the second chance he'd once been too blind to cherish. This time, he wouldn't waste it. Laughter and warm chatter filled Margaret's house, the air buzzing with gratitude and second chances as friends came and went, hugging Hannah, cooing at Ethan, and filling the living room with stories and hope. Hannah sat with Ethan in her arms, his calm, sleepy face oblivious to the storm he'd sparked and the miracle that had followed. Liam stayed close, folding tiny blankets with a clumsy care that made Hannah hide a grin behind her hand. Every few seconds, his eyes found her, as if he still needed to reassure himself she was really here, really safe. Her impossible recovery felt like a fragile gift everyone clung to but never dared question. Margaret, her smile brighter than ever, moved through the small crowd pouring tea, her steady hands a testament to a lifetime of loving people back to wholeness. "It's God's work," she said, eyes shining with faith. "He heard every word we prayed." Guests nodded, some wiping at tears, others sharing little stories about how faith had carried them through dark nights. Liam, who'd never stepped inside a church except for weddings and deals, felt something inside him crack open as he listened. His mind flicked back to the prayer chain he'd started, the flood of messages that had reminded him there was something bigger than ego or fear. Bigger than him. Now it was about Hannah. About Ethan. About building something honest, maybe for the first time in his life. And Hannah, she looked lighter. Free of the shadow that had dimmed her for so long. She still watched Liam carefully sometimes, like testing the ground under her feet, but when he hummed a lullaby off-key or cursed at crib instructions, her laughter came soft and real. Little by little, trust bloomed again between them, fragile but fighting to live. "You're stubborn, you know that?" she teased once, and Liam tucked that laugh away like a promise. But Bella's ghost lingered. Her texts kept coming. rage bleeding into pleading. She's using you. I miss you, Liam. Please talk to me. He read them, guilt gnawing at old wounds, but he never answered. His choice was carved in stone now. Ethan and Hannah were his future. One evening, drying dishes at Margaret's sink, Hannah glanced at him when his phone buzzed again. He didn't hide it, just stepped onto the porch, the night wrapping him in its cool hush. "Bella, stop," he said when he answered. "My life is here now, with Ethan, with Hannah. Please, let it go." He ended the call and let the silence wash over him before going back inside. Hannah was still at the sink, one brow lifted. "Sorted?" she asked, her tone deceptively casual. "Sorted," he said, and this time he meant it. Months rolled by, weaving Liam deeper into Ethan's routines, deeper into Hannah's quiet acceptance. He learned the sleepy sighs that meant Ethan needed his bottle now, the offbeat songs that calmed him down, the tiny smiles Hannah would hide behind a coffee cup whenever she caught him dancing with their boy in the living room. Sometimes, on calm nights, the old wounds found them anyway. Sitting side by side on the porch, Ethan snoring softly in his stroller, Hannah had asked, "Do you ever think about how it would have been if we hadn't fallen apart?" Liam turned to her then, the words rolling out honest and bare. "Every day. And every day I wish I'd fought harder for you. For us." She didn't answer, but her silence glowed like a spark he didn't dare blow out. A year after Ethan's birth, Liam planned something small, but right. He convinced Hannah to leave Ethan with Margaret for one evening and took her to a little Seattle diner, warm lights, an old acoustic guitar player humming familiar love songs in the corner. It was the first dinner they'd had alone in years. They laughed too loud over cheap wine, shared old stories, talked about a tomorrow neither had dared name before. When the dessert plates were cleared, Liam took her hand, still so familiar, still strong from holding so much alone. "Hannah," he began, his voice trembling more than he'd planned. "I know I don't deserve you. I know I failed you before. But you and Ethan, you're my family. I want to spend the rest of my life proving that." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, simple, beautiful, exactly her. He held it out, the whole room fading to a heartbeat's hush. "Will you marry me again?" Hannah's eyes filled so fast he feared the worst. But when she smiled, soft, tear-bright, it was like watching the sun break through every storm they'd survived. "Yes, Liam," she whispered, her voice cracking on a laugh. "For Ethan. For us." They kissed as the guitar picked up a love song from some old decade, and the diner burst into quiet applause, strangers wiping their eyes at a second chance unfolding right in front of them. The wedding took place at Margaret's cozy little church, a simple ceremony brimming with the kind of love that felt earned, not borrowed. Hannah walked down the aisle in a plain white dress, a bouquet of jasmine in her hands, its scent a gentle echo of her mother's porch. Ethan, now a bright-eyed 1-year-old, wore a tiny suit and rested angelically in Margaret's proud arms. At the altar, Liam felt his chest swell so wide it almost hurt. They stood facing each other again, not as the people who'd fallen apart once, but as the ones who had fought their way back. They renewed their vows softly, promising love, respect, and loyalty not just to each other, but to Ethan too. "I'll always be here," Liam said, his voice thick with tears he didn't bother to hide. "And I'll trust you, Liam," Hannah replied, her eyes shimmering. Ethan, sensing the joy, clapped his little hands, and the whole church broke into cheers and laughter. Years passed, soft and steady as dawn. Ethan grew up wrapped in warmth, dashing barefoot through hallways, scraping his knees, learning to ride his bike with Liam's steady hands guiding him, curling up beside Hannah for bedtime stories about bravery and second chances. He was a bright soul, his mother's gentle eyes, his father's stubborn spirit, and a heart always hungry for hugs. Hannah, once afraid her story might end too soon, found purpose in helping other women feel less alone. Her Heart Moms group, born from one late-night post about surviving Ethan's birth, blossomed into a lifeline for mothers navigating risky pregnancies. She spoke at events across the coast, with Liam and Ethan always in the front row, beaming with pride. Liam scaled back his once cutthroat business, trading endless late nights for family dinners, for games on the floor with Ethan, for being the man who never missed bedtime kisses. Even Bella found her own peace, building a fresh start in Portland with a new career and a partner who loved her well. Liam wished her the best, quietly grateful they'd all carved out new beginnings. One golden summer night, when Ethan was 5, Liam and Hannah sat side by side on the steps of their new backyard deck. Ethan squealed with delight as he chased their goofy rescue dog across the grass, his laughter cracking open the warm night air. Hannah leaned into Liam's shoulder, a soft smile tugging at her lips. "Ever think about how different things might have been?" she asked, her voice a gentle murmur only for him. Liam pressed a kiss to her forehead, the only answer that ever fit. "Every day. And every day, I'm thankful. For you, for him, for this." They stayed there beneath a sky scattered with stars, hearts settled and strong, knowing that whatever storms had come before, they'd built something that nothing could break. Their story, rooted in mistakes and miracles, became a quiet proof, whispered among friends and neighbors, that love, tended with patience and fought for honestly, could heal even the deepest cracks. And Ethan, laughing under moonlight, eyes bright as hope, was living proof that the bravest miracles grow from the hardest choices. So the story is over. Our wonderful friends, are you really still here at this hour? If you're reading these last words with your heart wide open, then maybe, just maybe, something in Liam and Hannah's journey has gently knocked on the door of your own life too. What did this story remind us? That sometimes we break things so badly we think they can't be fixed, that people leave, trust shatters, and life spins out beyond what we can hold. But also, that the deepest cracks can grow the strongest roots when we dare to own our mistakes and stand in the hard places we once ran from. Liam didn't become a better man overnight. He learned, the long bruising way, that love means showing up when it's least convenient, and family means choosing the same hearts every single day, even when the world tempts you with easier exits. As Rumi once said, the wound is the place where the light enters you. Hannah's scars, Liam's regret, even Ethan's tiny heartbeat, they all prove that sometimes the love you nearly lose becomes the love that saves you most. So if tonight you feel broken or guilty or afraid that you've messed up too much to start again, remember, you haven't. You can stand back up. You can choose love better this time. And if you're lucky, someone who still believes in you might be waiting on the porch with a soft smile and a second chance. If this story touched you, please tap that like button, share it with a friend who needs a little hope, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We're here to remind each other that even the most cracked hearts can find healing, one honest choice at a time. Until our next story, take care, love bravely, and keep fighting for your own miracle.